Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another episode of Mental Health Matters. My name's Harpal, and this show we openly talk about mental health issues. Today we've got a very interesting topic. It's not a topic that's mentioned quite a lot in mainstream. It's the topic about working with families and people who have a loved one or a relation who's going through mental health. And we've got a really expert panel today. So going to help us understand what family members are going through and where they can get help. First guest we've got on here is Reetu Sharma, an women's empowerment ambassador, humanitarian educator. She's a multi-award speaker, event organizer, an author, a playwright, an actress, and a poet. And she leads a community organization called Kushala UK, which is dedicated to empowering women and works with areas of mental health and domestic abuse. Reetu Ji, Waheguru Ji Ka
Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Thank you for coming to our show and giving us your expert views on this. Alongside that, we've got Dan, who's Dan Baines, who's returning back from us, got 10 years of working mental health experience, working anxiety, depression, and trauma. So Dan, welcome back here again.
Thank you very much.
And lastly and not least, we've got a wonderful Rajiv here from Journey of Compassion. He's going to come today and share words of wisdom once again. So, so today we're talking about family, the effects of family that it has, or friends, your social, on people who suffer from mental health. So it could be any type of mental health, anxiety, depression, addictions, as we've gone on before. So what are the most common emotions and psychological effects experienced by relatives with mental health issues? So
yeah, I think the two most common mental health conditions are anxiety and depression. And I think it's important to note that these can be quite individual to the person. So like we mentioned before, if there's multiple people lined up with anxiety, each of those need something different and they suffer in a different way. And so, yeah, I suppose it's about finding out what that person specifically in your family needs for support. Having the kind of patience and understanding and being there with it.
I know you're doing quite a lot of work with Kushala UK and you do quite a lot of family work, especially with kids, and you work with women. I'm just wondering, from your experience, how is it with families, the effects of mental health on families, especially children and young people as well?
So if we look at it from a broad perspective, of course, children are massively affected by anything that's going on around them, be it domestic abuse, be it mental health issue, be it anything that is not adding on to their general well-being. So mental health as well, if they have an adult around them who's affected for whatever reason, the children are going to directly be impacted by that, especially if it's a parent. More than anybody else, or who's got the prime care duty of care towards them. So children are going to pick stuff up and they are going to feel let down, left out, because they're not going to be treated how they should be treated, as in speaking in the broad sense. Talking about, if we bring it specifically to Punjabi families, and again we speak about mental health issues and how the family would be impacted about that. I feel sorry to say that mostly the families in such a situation firsthand will feel ashamed and they would see it as a disaster. So why our family? Why do we have to deal with this? And I suppose there's a lot of education that needs to go into this, lots of exposure that needs to be brought to our communities at large to make them see that it's okay. Understanding, Dan mentioned that the family members should be understanding around a person who's got mental health issues. If the family, the first people who should care for you, if they don't understand when a person's going through stress, disorder, depression, anxiety, then we can't really expect anybody outside the family to be compassionate towards the patient as well. So I suppose the family first and foremost should understand what this person is going through and be accepting of it.
Dan, coming to you in terms of, we talked in our last episode about addictions. Addictions can be a taboo, can be quite shameful, as we said. But what can we do? What is enough being done for those who are suffering with the sufferer?
Really.
I think, yeah, like you're saying, it's even a taboo to have a mental health condition. I think even to admit that you're suffering is quite hard. To admit that you need support and asking for help, that can be hard. But I want people to view and understand that actually reaching out for support is a step of bravery, and it's courageous, and it's admitting that you need help, and it's having people there that are willing to reach back when you reach your hand out, and that's what we can offer to our family.
With you, buddy, I know you help quite a lot of Punjabi community, families, friends. What's your take on the subject?
Again, I'm going to do what I often do. I'm going to make it more personal because this is actually very close to home. So I would say, but just I'm going to look at it from two perspectives. One is the learning that we can take from what happened in our own lives, what we would do differently now. And then, I can also share the way we did deal with it. So when I went through my struggles started in 2016, then went over into 2017. So the thing that we can learn and do differently now was when I went through the initial changes, and when my wife did notice that there was a change, because of the lack of awareness, and like you said, that the understanding needs to be there. But what came to my mind straight away is that, well, how is that understanding supposed to be there? Because say if nobody in the household has really gone through anything, there's only really two ways then. Either we need to push generally that everyone is encouraged to build a certain level of understanding around the more common mental health issues like depression and anxiety, which are the more common ones. So that would have to be like a general campaign that we push out, where we encourage all people, to try and just get their understanding of mental health to a certain level. Otherwise, really the only way we're going to learn about it is when it comes to us, when it comes to our doorstep, right? So when it came to our doorstep, we missed the initial signs. And if we had then caught the initial signs and the initial change of negativity that started to happen, the way I'm looking at things, and if my wife had possibly then seeked help for support then, but she could only seek out for that support then if we knew that where this is going. So that's our learning. That's what I would take away. What we would do different is to intervene much sooner and to know to look out for these signs. But what we did do is, which is the positive side of it, so the impact it had on my wife. So that was a huge, because this is what we're focusing on here in this episode, that the impact it had on her was she was in shock. It wasn't expecting it. So she's got all these emotions to go through. She's trying to make sense of what's happened to my husband. He's a different person. So she's going through change now. She's lost a person to who she knew once upon a time. And then, but what she did to get support for that was the community that we were involved with, the Gurdwara, some of the Sangat that we had. Eventually, when we when we understood, all right, something's happening here, and when it got worse, then she made some groups on WhatsApp where then there was people from the Sangat that were checking in on her as well to say, how are you coping? I know this is a big change, difficult for you, you've got two small kids. So they were giving her suggestions as well, what she could be doing for herself, making sure she gets to pop out for a moment, to do something for herself. But then she also then she took time off work. And I'm not telling a story about ourselves, but this is what we actively did, which is the takeaway for the people that are listening. So one was reaching out to the community. So she had a couple of groups. One was with the family, and then one was with the community, the Sangat. So then they were all then chipping in and helping what they could do, like maybe take me out for a walk. So they should have a group of people that would come and help do that, which was then helping her so she could have some time out. And then she also then approached her work where she had to have time off. But then through her work, she worked for the Birmingham City Council as a social worker. They then helped her to get CBT for herself because she ended up with having anxiety when she would have certain triggers looking at the state I was in. So then she was able to get the professional help as well as then the spiritual community help. And she started going Gurdwara more regularly, where it's time out to just meditate. And so I think these are some of the things that we did. And then the first part was what we could potentially do differently, look out for the earlier signs.
That's amazing. Can I just say something? I mean, what I see here is a thread of compassion throughout Baljit, that your wife, although if she didn't understand it, she was ready to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly as a specialist yourselves and being social people, you'd agree that many families would rather shun than be open to accepting and understanding. And I think that's a major issue with our communities currently.
I think one point I want to add into the mix here is this suffering happens over a period of time. And a lot of the family don't know that they're going through the suffering until it's at the worst end degree. And Dan, please come in with this in terms of the burnout rate, the time when it gets too much. And there's a saying in Punjabi, and when mental health kicks in, as you probably know, it takes time to kick in. And what's it affects the family differently. And the Deepaji's talked about his particular circumstances from a professional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's getting towards burnt down rage, what strategies, what coping mechanisms can you?
Yeah, so I think that's making me think about looking at it from a preventative kind of way. It's much harder to kind of pick ourselves up at burnout. So if we can spot the signs a bit earlier, then hopefully we won't have to go all the way down that road. And that can be just having open, frank conversations with close ones. Doesn't have to be professional. People that know you really well. They might be able to spot the signs like you had. And then checking in with yourself as well. It can be even as small as checking in with your energy levels, kind of checking in with your general well-being, whether you're actually accessing. So a lot of the early signs as well can be around isolating ourselves, kind of withdrawing from activities that we once found useful and helpful. So yeah, like I was saying with the preventative measures, it's about kind of checking in with yourself, having loved ones that know you well enough that will be able to check in and spot the signs, and just having those kind of quite challenging conversations with one another can be really helpful as getting kind of seeing it earlier before you've actually reached burnout itself.
There's a terminology we were talking about earlier on off air was healthy relationships in families, and in our Punjabi community I don't think we have much healthy relationships when it comes to parents, and nowadays with divorce going on the increase. What is a healthy relationship nowadays? And it's not like the husband comes home and starts beating his wife and goes, "What did you think?" I don't think so. And putting a joke to the side, but can you shine a bit more light on healthy relationships?
I think it helps to know what an unhealthy relationship is as well, to kind of explain that. So if you've got any relationships in your life where it feels like it takes away more from you than it gives, that could be bordering into unhealthy. Healthy relationships should be give and take. That's kind of the definition of a healthy relationship. And there might be times where you need more support and the other person might need more support, so that might move. It's not always going to be 50-50. I guess I don't want to kind of bring that rigid idea out there, but yeah, I think it's important that healthy relationships are something that feels like it gives you something to your spirit. Does it kind of take away and just brings a bit of light into your life, really.
I know you've doing quite a lot of work with women and empowering women. Women empowerment is a phenomenal topic. I want you to just explain how you empower women.
So we run a few projects with Kushal UK to do with health and well-being, which includes mental health massively. We run once in a year conference to do with mental health and domestic abuse in the start of the year, bringing experts to the room and basically pushing the idea that mental health and domestic abuse, we call it domestic abuse, but any situation at home impacts your mental health, the good, the bad, the ugly. So we're trying to push it out there to say that, you know what, we need to look at it from a perspective that mental health is impacted by how people are treated. And of course, the work I do is with women, so I talk from women's perspective. And women empowerment sometimes gets very misjudged, because when we talk about women empowerment, we're not necessarily talking about feminism. We're talking about empowerment, individual empowerment, which has nothing to do with the other person. An empowered person would know themselves and know what they want and how they want to be treated and what their boundaries are. It's got nothing to do with the other person. They don't and shouldn't class themselves as superior or inferior. Each individual to their own kind of a thing. So I think when we talk about empowerment, quite a few times it's misjudged that, oh, so you're anti-men. No, we're not. On the other hand, we are supportive of men as well. We've had a couple of cases last year where men have had domestic abuse, and we supported these people because they happened to turn up.
It's interesting how we talk about victims, and I'm listening to you guys, I'm seeing these invisible victims, children who are suffering with domestic violence going on, divorce going on, and I'm hearing a lot of children acting out on certain things, but if I can shed some light on when the splitting happens of parents, and then you've got these invisible victims of children who are used. Just want to get your thoughts on this.
There's a line that comes to my mind from Gurbani where Guru Nanak talks about this sense of responsibility and not playing this game of constant pointed fingers and blame. So I think it's important when I think about that line where Guru Nanak's talking about the dosh and the ukase. Dosh karama apne jo main kiya so main paya. Dosh na dijiye avarjana. And there's this sense of responsibility. So if we start putting that into children, so even if somebody needs to part their ways, but what's being fed to them is, for example, poison of how wrong and bad the other person is, or the other partner is, or their parent. Instead, I think when I say responsibility, I don't mean to say, it doesn't mean fault. It means saying that I no longer can do this, and I take responsibility that I no longer want to live like this. So that's empowerment.
Yeah.
In saying that I need to take this step now. Yeah. And whether they might be at the age of understanding the situation, or they may not be. So you've got to intuitively know how much exposure they are ready for and what they can, at this moment in their life, be able to understand. So you've got to be careful in how much you expose to them based on their age. And then at the same time, just trying to explain the situation to them if they're of an age of the why, without playing that game of spewing poison and planting that into their mind towards another person. Instead, trying to just explain the situation as close as possible to what it is. And that way, you're not then setting them up on this biased perception of life, and where you're filling them with a sense of bitterness to hold on to in their lives. So in that way, you want them to be in a place where they can come to an understanding, well, this is the situation and this is the step that I need to take, and this is the step that that person needs to take. So I think that sense of responsibility is important. That's the first thing that came to my mind. But just to finish off as well before, because we were talking specifically more about the impact of them witnessing or being around or observing mental health, me being a parent, because that's again something we went through. And I think the people that are supporting, because the person that's going through the mental health, they're not going to have generally that sense of awareness of how much to whether I shouldn't expose them to this, because they had that level of awareness, then they would be able to do more for their own well-being. But if it's at a point where they're not able to have that filter, then it's generally the support system that's in place around them that will generally do that part to be careful in how much the children are exposed to of that parent's mental health, and then explaining as much as you can to them based, again, on their level of understanding, not overexposing them to information as well.
Okay. Fantastic thought there. Thank you very much. Dan, we'll come back to you. We come from the younger generation. We've got loads of people in our community whose older children, I'm talking 20s, 30s, and their 40s, are suffering from some sort of mental health issue. And then you've got parents in their 50s, 60s, 70s who are also struggling with them because that person's at home, they've got some sort of mental health condition. What advice would you give to them?
I think it can be useful first to actually grow our awareness on these mental health conditions, what they are, what the person that you're living with might be suffering with. Even if you went to, say, if they had appointments with doctors, even if you went there with them, they might feel less shame in themselves about it, knowing that there's people there willing to hold their hand. So yeah, I think growing awareness is critical, because then you can kind of have an understanding of what that person might be going through.
One thing I'll say is, in our community, we don't grow awareness, we grow panic.
Yeah.
We just want everything fixed here and there and there. So it's literally, we want the pharmacy today and eat the fruits tomorrow kind of scenario. And you get those, I don't know if you get those coming through to you.
Yeah, people want to be cured in one session. Yeah, I'd be a millionaire then.
What advice would you give to those parents who want their child or daughter or son to be cured?
Sure. I suppose to understand that it's a process. Recovery is a very individual process for each person. What they might need now might vary to what they might need later. So it's keeping that communication open between one another. We mentioned kind of the healthy relationships earlier. That's one of the keys as well, I suppose, having that healthy, open communication. Kind of growing to the point where, I know it's not normal in our community, it wasn't normal in my house, but where we can actually talk about feelings with one another, actually check in with our children. How are you feeling? And actually being an adult who models that, who shows how you're feeling to them as well. Because like we were saying, children are sponges and they pick up everything around them. And so if you're modeling behaviours that it's okay to feel nervous sometimes, it's okay to be scared. Anxiety is a normal human response. It's part of our biology. So kind of understanding it from that level, kind of humanizing it in a way, makes sense.
Then finally, did you ones who are in domestic violence situation where mental health has been affected from the event, what few words would you say to them?
I would say to them that they have to take care of themselves first. And as it's been said before, that awareness is so important. Of course, they'd want to protect their children, but they want to be aware, they have to be aware of how they are around their children. And then children must be put in some sort of therapy if they have the means and resources, which I suppose are accessible if an effort is made. Because children will be impacted regardless of how so much effort has been made. They will be impacted by parent separation.
Sure, saying a big thank you to Reetu, Dan, Vaji for spending your time and sharing your words of wisdom there as well. And hopefully somebody at home will be able to take on board what's being said. Mental health is out there. People are suffering, even your loved ones. And sometimes it's about working with what's going on, how things are, and seeking that support for yourself. Support is out there. You ought to take the first step. Until next episode, I'll say a big thank you to our Amaya. Until next episode, please take care of yourself and each other. Right, Ruji Kar Khansa. Right, Ruji Firin.